sees the memes of production, and the like and subscribe button. I wasn't joking when I said that Gavin Newsom is pivoting to the right and is intending to run either as like a right Democrat or as a moderate Republican.
Well, they've been doing it for decades. I mean, we've saw the welfare queens. They've seen the Southern strategy. We've seen it over and over. It's an old playbook, and we're as dumb as we want to be that we allow them to do this with CRT and ESG and DEI and every three-letter word.
And then they demonize people.
Yeah, demonize, and they weaponize grievance. They other people. They talk down to people, past people. They humiliate people. They weaponize difficult issues. But the bottom line is, and I think it goes back to what we began with, is, and I applaud you for this, is we can't
look a psychopath like Vaush once. He's not a real psychopath, okay? I'm doubting his credentials, all right? Gavin Newsom is just as much of a slimy, no principles motherfucker as anyone else. If anything, he's just more morally bankrupt. He's a psychopath in the sense that he's more to the right and more shameless about it. I don't like, it's not, that's not, I'm not talking about that, okay? I'm talking about a cutthroat motherfucker, okay? I'm talking about a Democrat who represents the anger of the constituency.
Not continue to be on the defense reacting to this. We've got to go on the offense. We got to meet people where they are. But I also think this, and this is where, you know, this is part of the conversation I'm trying to have, is you got to respect people you disagree with, even, and you can't just dismiss people.
How do you fight it?
And well, this
I think I could kick most of their ass. I do think if they wanted to. I know I can outrun them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing.
Counter but it's a natural reaction. I think it's one of the reasons we're losing so many men. And again, it's multi-ethnic. It's not just white men. We're losing them. We're losing them to these guys online. We're losing them people that I'm bringing on this podcast as well. That's why I brought.
These are bad guys, though. These are bad guys,
but they exist, and we could deny they exist.
Jesus Christ, man! I've heard a version of this conversation play out like so many times, and it's like, well, what you know, it's always like some version of the what if the grifter incel podcasters have a point, you know?
They exist. Not only they exist, they persist, and they're actually influencing young kids every single day.
How do we push some of those guys back under a rock?
I think we have to first understand what their motivations are. I think we have to understand
their motivations are making money off of insecure youth
and what they're actually doing. And
you don't think that's racism and misogyny?
I think there's a lot of that, but I don't think it's exclusively that. When you talk to a guy like Steve Bannon, he talks about working folks, and he talks about how
Jesus, Dude, we're really pretending that Steve Bannon has any concern whatsoever for the plight of the working man. We're doing that bit. Adolf Hitler, in his writings before taking over the German government, was like, yeah, we're gonna uplift the German worker. I mean, all that went to shit as soon as he actually took charge.
We hollowed out the industrial core of this country. I understand that, but we can dismiss the notion of election denialism.
The only way to have a prosperous working class is by having them work in like car factories or something. Nobody's invented an economy where people can get decent wages like through services. No one's figured it out yet, you know? It's crazy. There's just, I don't know, man. You have an economy where trillions of dollars run through it every year, tens of trillions every year in the GDP, and for some reason, like basically none of it touches the working class. You know, it's like a few trillions circle around in the real economy, and tens of trillions circle around in the like Wall Street investment speculative economy that floats above all of it, not actually touching or helping anyone who needs the help. It just inflates the arbitrarily large portfolios of people who will never actually use that money for anything, because you can't spend $100 billion. No one can spend, that's not real. That's not a real amount of money. It's just like a number next to your stat sheet. It's not, it doesn't meaningfully affect, it should, like, and the bubble will pop, and then some other guy will be worth 200 billion or whatever. The markets will dip and your worth will crater in half. There's no effect. But of course, Gavin Newsom's never going to do anything about any of this because he's the governor of California. It's the same problem you have with New York Democrats. The closer a Democrat is to money, the less likely they are to be a Democrat.
And we could completely dismiss.
Or maybe the more likely they are to be a Democrat, depending on how cynical you're feeling.
What he did on January 6th, but I don't think you can dismiss what he's saying. Reminds me a lot of what Bernie Sanders was saying. Reminds me a lot of what Democrats said 20, 30 years ago.
Idiot. I like how this is the only short we've seen from Gavin Newsom where he ends with him talking. When he was talking to Steve Bannon and when he was talking to Charlie Kirk, he let them have the final point on every short. He talks to Tim Walz, and it's him pushing back. It's literally the only pushback. That's great. That's great, man. Yeah, Steve Bannon, he's just like Bernie Sanders.
I always use this analogy that there's a whole bunch of people, Gavin, that see rights like a pie. If somebody gets some, they lose part of their pie.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Not that way. Expanding rights that there's no one. I keep coming back to that idea and this idea of freedom that, well, that can be everybody. I don't know why they're in these small, little, narrow, divisive issues. Other than I think some of these people are masterful at it so they can get to their true goal, which is to cut taxes for the wealthy and shift wealth in their direction.
Yeah, and by the way, and concurrently increase taxes for the middle class and the poor. And people forget that. But let me just, make this point because it needs to be made. In Florida and Texas, they tax their poorest more than we tax our richest.
That's 100% correct.
How the hell are we losing this tax debate?
Yes.
Who are you for? By the way, 71, I'm going to keep going. 71% of the economy in this country are in blue metros. So point being, it's not that we're not right, but I think we're wrong not to understand more deeply and fully that people think we are deeply full of ourselves and we're talking down to people. And
you are Gavin Newsom. I cannot fathom. They're never gonna buy this, dude. You are the last person they would accept into their oh, you actually have a point on some issues coalition.
And pass people. People want to be protected, they want to be respected, and they want to be connected. And I think this notion of respect is something that keeps coming back to me. People that just feel like we don't respect them.
That's great, man. I know, Masaigo, you've linked it 3 times now. I saw it every time. Thank you.
I think that's racism and misogyny.
I think there's a lot.
We saw this.
A lot of that, but I don't think it's. I understand that, but we can dismiss the notion of election denialism. We could completely dismiss what he did on January 6th, but I don't think you can dismiss what he's saying. Reminds me a lot of what Bernie Sanders was saying. Reminds me a lot of what Democrats said 20, 30 years ago. I mean, he's arguing
hates
against
Musk, right? He hates
Musk. He hates the oligarchy. He totally agrees with you on.
Steve Bannon hates the oligarchy. Come on. The only reason Steve Bannon hates Musk is because he hates the fact that a halfwit has achieved that level of power. Steve Bannon is a very intelligent person. He probably resents the fact that he's been like a militant, effective advocate for Nazism in the United States for well over a decade now, advancing the aims of the far right step by step. And Elon Musk is a dumbass grifter who turned Republican in 2022 so that people wouldn't get mad at him for sexually harassing an employee, and then is now the shadow president,
On the concentration of monopolistic powers, he completely dismisses the notion that we should extend the tax cuts for corporations and the very wealthy. He thinks we should lower taxes for the middle class and wants to see.
That's great. You can take a look at Steve Bannon's politics. They're not exactly subtle. What are we talking about? Whether or not Tim Walz has the sauce? Look, I like Tim Walz. Walz AOC feels emotionally balanced, Vaush, I'm telling you. I don't think so. I think it's not that I dislike Walz. I just think he's got baggage now. And I think that you need someone who's more cutthroat. I think Walz would make a phenomenal senator. Do you think AOC isn't cutthroat enough? Yes, I do think that. How do you have baggage from 2 months of exposure? When those 2 months of exposure are you being the vice presidential candidate to Kamala Harris and then losing? Buttigieg is such a normie demagogue. Oh, Buttigieg's career is done. He's also too tied to the old Democrats. It's the stench of failure. It wafts over everything associated with Biden. Everything touching that era has to go away. It has to stop. If you're a representative, you can carry over as long as you fall in line with what the Democrats mean and represent now. But it's just not, Do you think she could become more cutthroat? She could, sure. She's only 6 or something. She's really young. 35. Crockett is pretty cutthroat, but I think she's Crockett's politics aren't there is the problem. I literally see the narrative that Pete said nothing for 2 months and only now he's allowed to speak. If any Democrats from Biden's administration are going to come forward and be relevant to the future, they need to disavow Biden. And right now that seems unthinkable, but it needs to happen. It needs to be listen, I tried my best under the auspices of this administration, but we were lied to about Biden's cognitive decline. He failed to fight for the American people, and so did Kamala Harris. When the American people needed leadership after Trump's victory, Kamala Harris just left. Biden just left. They don't care about you. And they don't. And that's true. Everything that I just said is objectively correct. They don't. But right now, it's unthinkable. But Tim Walz will need to do it. They will all need to do it. And in order for this to happen, in order for it to even be conceivable that this happens, the anger against the Democrats will need to grow. Like 27% approval of the Democrats is too high. Bring it down, 24, 21, 19%. How far will it have to go before people are throwing their hands up in the air like, well, it looks like in terms of like people's opinion, in terms of public opinion, there is no longer any consequence to bad-mouthing the Democrats. Like, at this point, if you are a Democrat, it is better for you politically to talk the Democrats than to speak favorably of them. So do we want her to f off forever, or are we mad that she's not doing anything? Both, of course. Both, obviously. Not breaking from Biden hurt the Harris campaign. Yeah, the DNC just doesn't like infighting. No daylight. No daylight. No daylight. No daylight, man. No daylight. Whether she won or lost the election, Biden thought she would only harm him by publicly distancing herself from him, especially during a debate that would be watched by millions of Americans. To the extent that she wanted to forge her own path, Biden had no interest in giving her the room to do so. He needed just 3 words to convey how much all that mattered to him. No daylight, kid. Just truly, one for the history books. Who cares about Biden at this point? Well, a lot of Democrats do. Well, a lot of insider Democrats do, you know? Because a rejection of Biden is a rejection of the entire DNC establishment. You're not just saying F Biden, right? You're saying like everything that allowed that travesty of a presidency and the follow-up election to happen, all of it, all of it.